Hello, and thank you for joining everyone. My name is Anthony D'Ambrosio. I'm the Houston ACE leader for Atlassian. I appreciate you attending this session with Revyz. I have Stu and Vish who are going to be presenting their backup solution for Atlassian's products. The reason for this session is to kind of cover the shared responsibility model that Atlassian has. There's a couple things around the Atlassian shared responsibility in reference to, say, compliance, such as like SOX, PII data, and things of that nature. And then also backing up your data, you are responsible for it. I know most customers aren't aware that they actually do have a responsibility to back up their data. So if something does happen, on your side, not necessarily Atlassian side, it'll make it really hard to recover, a project or a Confluence site or page, or even just an individual record. So Stu and Vish are basically going to pick it up from here and kind of tell you how they're addressing this issue with Atlassian.
All right, Anthony, thank you for the lovely invitation. I remember being in Vegas at Team back whenever that was, a couple of months ago, and being interviewed, and the interviewer said, look, what are you most worried about for 2024 for Atlassian cloud customers? And I said, the fact that not enough people know about shared responsibility. Because when people navigate their world without knowing about this topic and not really kind of working through this potential feeling of false sense of security and safety, I really worry about people getting into trouble further down the track, both from a data loss perspective, but also from a compliance perspective, and not understanding until too late what your obligations are. So I'm going to hit shared screen, and then I'll do some intros, and then we'll really quickly get into things. So the agenda today is three points. We're going to talk about shared responsibility, and I know it's maybe not the most popular or exciting topic. It's kind of like insurance, but you really need to understand it. So I'm going to talk about that. We're going to then talk to, as Atlassian customers and users, what your responsibilities are in relation to that shared responsibility. So we'll drill into some specifics. And then Vish, who's my colleague, is going to talk about specific tactics, challenges, and how to back up your Jira and Confluence data. And we're going to showcase some of the tools, how people use our tools. Noticing through a bunch of people joining, so welcome everyone. Welcome Susan, who's one of our customers. And we're going to kick straight into things now. Firstly, I'm Stu. I look after partnerships and marketing at Revyz. Been around in technology for way too long. I've done all sorts of things. Loving my role at Revyz. Been here for, I don't know, around a bit over a year. I'm an Atlassian creator. I'm an ACE leader here in Auckland in New Zealand. I love to do ultra running and running through the jungle when I am not Uber driving for my 2 teen kids. My colleague is Vish Reddy. He is the co-founder and CEO at Revyz. His background is in a lot of large corporate backup and data security businesses, but he has, if you ever get him one-on-one, ask him about programming chips and his really deep deep technology background and history. He's ACE leader in San Francisco. He got me lost hiking in the woods out the back of San Fran, so that's one of the things he likes doing. He is also a teen Uber driver for his daughter. Who are we? We're Revyz. We're a marketplace partner at the Atlassian Marketplace. 2 days ago, we were named a Gold Marketplace partner, which we were super excited about. We were backed by Atlassian Ventures, founded in 2022. We manage and protect the data inside Jira and Confluence, and we do that in a way that we hope is the leading, most efficient and automated and easy to use platform. That's our goal. We have 4 apps in the marketplace, so go ahead and have a look at them. But we're not here to just talk about our products. We're here to talk about shared responsibility and why do we need to back up our data? Why is it not being dealt with by Atlassian 100%? And so there's two key areas that I want to cover off in terms of the why factor here. And the first one is the threat landscape. Okay, so we had on our website and on our blog and on our YouTube channel, we did a really interesting interview with a couple of specialists in cybersecurity. And the three big things that came from that conversation was to look out for in 2024 is that cyber threats to cloud platforms are dramatically rising. Okay, so external cyber attacks are moving from on-premise to cloud in line with the global upsurge in cloud usage. The other thing that's sitting on top of that is the really big upsurge in the sophistication of cloud attacks. And part of that is driven by really easily to access tools such as AI-driven technologies that allow the phishing attacks, allow the attacks that used to be quite costly and time-consuming, allows them to be done at scale and at pace. And so it's a bit of a scary world. On top of that is a lot of global economic pressure and a lot of regional conflict, which brings in other threat vectors to the cloud surface. We're not going to talk deeply about cyber threats, but the key point here is that they are all on the rise and they are moving towards targeting cloud. And that's not just Atlassian, that's you as the cloud customers below it. Okay. The next big thing to realize is that the compliance landscape globally, I don't know, I feel like 2024 is the year of compliance. Man, I get inquiries from partners all around the world. It's very, very hot topic in Europe, in particular at the moment, around not just new compliance regulations, but revisions to compliance regulations, and revisions to essentially the teeth and the jurisdictions and the impact that they have on businesses. And this really fascinating and daunting challenge for people, which is the overlapping compliance frameworks. So you might be a healthcare related business, so you've in the States, and so you've got HIPAA to deal with, but then you might also have customers in the EU. So now you have to deal with GDPR. You might, as a corporate organization, need to adhere to SOC 2 in order to maintain your standing within your industry and your clients. And with all of these overlapping compliance situations, we're sitting with a really, really big problem for Atlassian customers, and that is who's responsible for what. So you've got compliance on one side, you've got all of these evolving security threats on the other side, and you've got this cloud application. And the first part we're going to talk about is the origin of shared responsibility, because shared responsibility is a little bit like buying an insurance policy, right? So when everyone has insurance, most of us don't like paying for it, but we know we need it. And there's kind of two parts of insurance. There's the policy documents, and then there's the claims process. And the policy documents are kind of like, okay, here's all the things that I need to adhere to myself. So if I've got a policy on a car to protect my car, I need to make sure that that car is in a secure area where I park it. It needs to be locked and it needs to be certified and warranted and all of those sorts of things. And if I don't, then I know, and I know that those things are my responsibility. And so shared responsibility works in a very similar way. The claims process is kind of what I would look at as your data protection mechanism. So this is the process that you go to, like, get your data back, or to get your when an incident happens, your disaster recovery planning process. That's kind of like your claims process, as the analogy of the day. So what's the origin of shared responsibility, and why do we have it? So our whole tech, for those of us who've been in tech for like 20 odd years, we all went through this process of, we started off with on-premise computing, and 100% everything was computers that we had, which moved towards this virtual machines and data center hosting. So I'm going to talk through this origin story and how we got to this situation with this complicated shared responsibility model. So we used to have on-premise computing where we had control of both, we had control and responsibility to look after all of the platforms, databases, data storage, backups, configuration, the people and processes of both our software and the platforms that we ran our software on. And then over time, things have migrated towards this point in software as a service where, you know, we don't have a lot of control of what we have inside of the Jira cloud. We get to enter data, we get to manipulate data, but we don't have a lot of control of it. And the problem that has arisen is that the cloud providers in B2B, such as Atlassian, right? When they move their platforms to cloud, they come to this realization that B2B customers, that's you, large organizations, have quite distinctly different needs. Okay, so large organizations have a lot of compliance, they have a lot of regulation, they have a lot to lose, and small organizations have kind of less to lose, and they can be more nimble, and they can recover things manually in a lot more of an effective way. So how do SaaS organizations like Atlassian meet these challenges when they want to have a uniform software platform on the market? And really what came out of that was this idea of sharing. Okay, let's share the responsibility with the customers of parts of our platform and parts of our software. And so that comes, what that typically has turned into in the SaaS marketplace, and it's important to know that this isn't just an Atlassian thing, this is in every major B2B SaaS platform has one of these, is an agreement that's binding. So when you buy the software, when you buy into the software and you agree to the terms and conditions, you're agreeing to their shared responsibility model. Okay, it allows for more customer level control, and you also got to understand that shared responsibility models can and will change over time. So it's a thing that you need to be keeping in play with. You need to understand that vendor support, so Atlassian's support desk, is designed, they will support things based on what the shared responsibility model dictates, okay? And it's an industry standard. So I'm going to flick through. We've got, you know, Microsoft and SharePoint have a shared responsibility model. Salesforce have a shared responsibility model. AWS have a shared responsibility model as well. These are kind of like the granddaddies of cloud. I really like how they have put their model, which is that the customer has a responsibility for security in the cloud. AWS have responsibility for security of the cloud. And that's a really useful way of putting it. And if you apply that to Atlassian, you're in the same sort of space, right? So Atlassian shared responsibility, back when it was server and data center, right? Remember that? Hopefully no one here is still on server and has moved to data center if you haven't gone to cloud yet. But you know, when you've got access and control to it, you're responsible for looking after all of these things. Now, when you move to cloud, you still are responsible for user access, and you're still responsible for data management and data protection, okay? And very, very specifically, the statement here is something that a bunch of you should screenshot and share with your colleagues, right? Which is, we do not use these backups to revert customer-initiated destructive changes such as fields overwritten using scripts or deleted issues, projects, or sites. Okay, so if one of your staff inadvertently goes through and deletes something from Jira, it's gone forever, okay? And if you don't have a backup regime in place, then it is not accessible from the Atlassian support desk, okay? The same thing, and look, there hasn't been a lot of cases to argue with Atlassian there, is if there is a localized cyber attack, okay? Now, Vish might talk about that a little bit later. I'll talk about threats, but I'm going to move forward into section 2, right? Which is, now that we understand what shared responsibility is, how does that apply to people who are in the Atlassian ecosystem? What do you need to manage, okay? So I've broken it into 3 areas. Number 1, data residency. So you've got compliance. Data residency is something that you can configure within Atlassian, and in some of your application partners, such as backup partners, you can configure it there too. Compliance regulations, or a bunch of the compliance regulations that a lot of you will fall into, require you to be aware of and to have defined boundaries about where your data resides, right? So this is really, really important, particularly if you're working with offshore customers. You need to be and particularly if you're working with, say, financial data, or you're a financial services organization or health services organization, you need to be really aware of your data residency requirements. And then you need to check in on how Atlassian is storing that data, or where you've configured that, and also your application partners, so your plugins, marketplace apps. Second section, data access and ownership. So this is user access, this is user security groups, this is user security roles. Who are administrators? Why are they administrators? Have you got the appropriate documentation and contracts in place and policies in your organization? Because this is not Atlassian's problem, this is your problem. And I think most people know about this part, but what a lot of people miss out on is this data resiliency part, right? You are responsible for that data, your data that resides within Atlassian's cloud. And again, I'll just reinforce this again and again. Look, if Atlassian have a major outage and a major fault that is caused by something they did or didn't do with the platform, and it affects all customers, then they will likely recover it for you. How long that recovery takes is not within your control. And where they recover from, and this is important, we'll get into this recovery point. Let's say Atlassian have some sort of major catastrophe or a hack of their stuff and they lose 2 days worth of data, right? Will they restore you back to 2 days ago? And do you have your own data to overwrite that maybe from yesterday that's going to bring you up to a better recovery point? So these are the sorts of questions that you need to be asking yourself. Talked about that. I've skipped ahead from my slide, right? So, but the area that this all falls into, and again, it's something that I see overlooked, is disaster recovery planning in relation to your move to cloud. And a lot of people have kind of left their disaster recovery planning in the bottom drawer collecting dust, and are in a situation where should there be a disaster that has been caused internally, such as a cyber attack, or some sort of systematic workflow that has gone through and corrupted or damaged a whole lot of data, say attachments within Jira or something like that, what's the recovery plan, right? What are you doing? What is going to happen in order to get your business back in play? Now, disaster recovery planning for many compliance models is essential that it's not only documented, but it's up to date and it's tested. Okay, so we've got on our website, I've just said here, on the Revyz website, on the blog page, if you go on the blog page, there's a tag there which says disaster recovery planning. We've actually written a disaster recovery series of blogs. I think there's 2 more to come in that series of 5 articles. They're all about cloud-based disaster recovery advice. So I'd really recommend you have a look at that. So when you're planning a disaster recovery, a couple of the things that are really important to cover off are your objectives. So the what's, the whens, and the whys. And so some of the terminology that's used in the backup industry is RTO and RPO. So RTO is recovery time objective. So how quickly from the point of a disaster or data loss are you wanting to restore back to your recovery point? And the recovery point is where do we want to be able to recover to? Do we want to be able to recover back to yesterday, or are we okay if we lose a few days worth of data? So these are, again, all really important disaster recovery questions to ask. And probably ask these questions before you go ahead and start, if you haven't gone down this track already, before you really start implementing a solid backup regime, is really looking at your disaster recovery planning model, asking a whole lot of questions, making sure you've got a regime in play that you can actually test and document. And then also this really important thing at the bottom here, having an owner for disaster recovery planning, so that, and there's some sort of cadence within your organization, because invariably when you're talking about compliance, you're going to have to dig back into this information and this documentation. And in some cases, the compliance auditors are going to ask you, hey, when was the last time you did a backup restore test? And what was the scope of that test? And when was the last time you reviewed all of your data and confirmed all the data residency? So this kind of ownership and documentation of these areas within your organization need to be retained, even though you might have moved to cloud. Okay, so what action should you be taking? My advice, read the shared responsibility framework for Atlassian in detail, right? Have an owner of that model. Compare it to what you've got. Do an internal gap analysis of, okay, now that we fully understand shared responsibility, what are our gaps as an organization in order to make sure that we not only can recover and we feel comfortable about a variety of outages and data loss scenarios, but also that we're compliant with all of the obligations that we have as an organization and also in our industry. Okay, from there, you're going to find some gaps, like create a strategy plan, right? Drop it into Jira as a project, right? And create a management plan to ensure that you've got ownership of those gaps. One of those gaps might be backup and data recovery, and that's what Vish is going to talk about soon. Okay. When you're talking about all of this stuff with Atlassian Cloud, one thing, don't forget your apps. Okay. And I'm not just talking about your backup plugins. I'm talking about any plugin that might be storing even pieces of the data that's owned by you or is managed by you. You're responsible for that data, not the app partner. Okay. You're going to have very little recourse for those guys if things go wrong. So you're really going to make sure that you don't forget your plugins, right? And I have, Vish has turned his mic on. Vish, have I moved through quickly enough?
Sounds good, Stu. Thank you.
Oh, good. So why don't I unshare my screen and I'll switch over to you.
All right, sounds good. All right, so I'm going to go through, I think I skipped over one slide before. So choosing a backup solution, that's what I'm going to be talking about. Anthony had kindly sent over a format on some of the questions which should be answered. So I'm going to sort of go through that format. But before we get into that, I think one of the important things to keep in mind is there are different types of disaster scenarios which you would encounter. And going back to the shared responsibility model, which Stu talked about, there are certain pieces where certain types of disasters where you're responsible, what you're responsible for, and there are certain types of disasters which Atlassian is responsible for, and that's what I'm trying to call out here. In the scenario where there's a data center disaster, there's a data center which goes offline. Atlassian 2 is built on AWS, and something happens to the data center. The recovery process for that is the responsibility of Atlassian, AWS. I think that's where the responsibility falls. On the other hand, somebody deletes something accidentally on your Atlassian site. A user deletes something, or an admin deletes something, or you have a third-party app, going and deleting something accidentally. Something which we all experienced last week, I think. For those who were traveling, would have experienced it a bit more with the CrowdStrike and Microsoft issue, which I think everybody's aware of. So in those scenarios, then it is really the customer who is kind of responsible for getting their data back. So this chart kind of provides you a way to delineate, what you're responsible for, what type of disasters you're responsible for, and what type of disasters Atlassian, in this case, is responsible for. All right, so maybe a little bit about Revyz. We help solve two broad problems. One is data protection, I guess, backup and restore, and then configuration and change management. These are the two broad problems which we help solve. These two are kind of interrelated to each other in some regards. As an example, you must be wondering, why am I talking about change management when we're talking about backup and restore? Think about, you made some changes to your configuration, and for whatever reason, those were not the right changes to be made. And what do you do at that point? You're going to go to your backup and restore things back, or in other words, people also call it as a rollback, right? You made changes, you want to roll back to what to the changes which you made. All right. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to switch over to the format which Anthony had recommended to talk about what are the different backup capabilities that we as Revyz offer. Of course, when you install our app, there is no code, or there's no coding which has to be done. There is no infra which you have to provision. What I mean by infra is you may have you may have a script somebody's providing, which you have to provision like a virtual machine, or you have to provision storage. None of that, right? We provide backup as a service, which means you don't have to worry about managing scripts, you don't have to worry about managing infrastructure, and so on and so forth. Once you install the app automatically schedules your backups every 24 hours. You can go and customize the schedule of when that backup runs. In addition to that, you can always go into the app UI to run an on-demand backup. In terms of storage limits, there are pretty much no limits with regards to number of backup snapshots, projects, issues, spaces, pages. Of course, unlimited is a marketing term. Everybody says unlimited. We do have a fair use policy for the number of attachments you store up, and I think this is true with everybody, every cloud service provider. Even Google at one point of time, Gmail said unlimited storage for Gmail, but eventually, they put it in their fine print. There's a 15 gig limit on the free tier. So there is no unlimited per se. It's more of Stu making me put this term called unlimited. There are always limits for everything. All right. In terms of restore capabilities, you can restore Jira or Confluence objects in bulk, or you can do it in a very granular manner. You can restore at the project space or object schema more related to assets. You can restore at the issue or a page or an asset object level. And the same applies to configuration. You can restore back a specific workflow or object schema. There's a link out here which gives you more details about all the different capabilities. One of the points which Stu was talking about was RPO and RTO. RTO is restore time objective, and RPO is restore point objective. In our case, the restore point objective is 24 hours because that's what you get out of the box. You can of course go tune it further. With regards to RTO, which is your restore time objective, it all depends on how many things you're restoring back. In the old paradigm, and that's the reason why RTO or the terminology existed, which is you're restoring back your entire site, or again in the server world, you were restoring back the entire server hard disk. In that scenario, that takes time, and again, it all depends on the volume of data which is there. Even here, in this case, you're not, if you're restoring back a couple of issues, again, I've given you kind of benchmarks. A single issue, less than 2 minutes, 50 issues with attachments, less than 10 minutes. Of course, if you had attachments, each attachment was 20 gigs, then it is going to take some time. But again, giving you a benchmark of how quick it is. And the key thing to keep in mind out here is you can restore these different objects while your site is operational. You don't have to get all your users out. You don't have to tell. There is no downtime. Yes, there is downtime for those tickets or those pages which were lost or deleted accidentally, but there is no downtime for the remainder of the site. With regards to compliance and security, when it comes to our apps, we are built on AWS. And we operate out of 5 AWS data centers. Depending on where your Atlassian data is pinned, your backup data could reside in the US, Germany, Australia, Canada, and Singapore. All our apps are cloud fortified, and Revyz is a SOC 2 Type 2 certified organization. And then when it comes to data security, I think we're kind of unique in our implementation. Let me explain a little bit on what I mean by unique out here. Most data backup providers, from what I've seen, they have an architecture where, especially if they're operating out of multiple data centers, they have a architecture where you have a data plane and a control plane. The control plane is where they control all the different data centers where they're operating in from a central place, which means you have metadata flowing back and forth between various data centers. Now, if we go and talk to large financial services companies who want to use data backup services, they would require that all that metadata does not flow out from one data center to another data center. They want it all restricted to one place, again from a privacy and compliance perspective. So from that point of view, the Revyz backup and restore architecture is very unique. It is we have dedicated infra for a given customer. All of the data is segregated. Again, from a security standpoint, it becomes much more efficient in how we how data is handled. There is not much data sitting in memory. Everything is either in when you're backing up, it's either in motion or sitting in rest. And what this diagram is calling out is how we encrypt data. And we are ready for bring your own key, one of the requirements from an enterprise perspective. If somebody is interested in how the encryption works, happy to point you to some of the documentation which we have on our website, as well as other industry standards which we use to encrypt the data and keep it securely. In terms of app coverage, we have a single app which covers in all the various Jira family of products which Atlassian has got, which includes Jira Software, Jira Service Management, Work Management, Product Discovery, and Assets. It's a single app. The reason why I'm calling this out very specifically is there are other vendors out there in the marketplace where you got to buy a separate app for each of these different things. For Confluence, again, a single app. Bitbucket is something which is in our roadmap. And for non-Atlassian apps such as Office 365, Salesforce, and others, we partner with a very well-known company. If you're interested in having multiple apps being protected in a single place, please reach out to us and we can point you more on that direction. Now, I think what are some of the differentiators which we have compared to some of the other options which are out there? The key value pillars which we provide in our apps are backup and restore, which is what we call as protect. We help you manage your configuration. That's the management pillar. We provide a lot of analytics based on all the data which you have backed up for you, which helps you make better decisions as administrators. That's the analyze pillar. And then we provide you with tools which help you optimize your site so that it is as fast as it can be and easy to manage. So those are the 4 areas which we kind of help administrators with, Atlassian administrators with. Our Jira app, as an example, it's like I would call it a Swiss Army knife with think of it as 6 apps in one. Backup and restore, project issue deletion, audit log, backup and restore of Jira assets, management, managing your configuration and cloning it, bulk configuration, optimization, and analytics. If you think of all of these different pieces of functionality, These are available to you in the Atlassian marketplace as separate apps. You can go and pick and choose different apps to get all this functionality in one place. I'm going to probably skip over this slide, but it calls out what are the different use cases which you can address using our apps. Some of them are day-to-day usage or value providers from an administration perspective. I'll put in data backup and restore as more like an insurance use case, where if something goes wrong, obviously you have a mechanism to get things back. We do provide some data security or pure security type of use cases which we address, which includes capturing all the deletion events, scanning attachments, and so on and so forth. A couple screenshots of our app. As you can see, when you install the app, you start off from this page where it tells you about all the different functions which you can do: backup, clone and restore, cleanup, which is your optimization, site insights, which is your analytics, which we provide. We also have audit logs of anything which you do in our app is logged. This helps you from a compliance and security perspective. This is an example of our issue deletion screen, where anytime somebody deletes something, one of the first questions your security person is going to be asking about or thinking about is, okay, who deleted, what did they delete, when did they delete? The 4 or 3 W's, however you want to look at it, right? Who, what, when, and where. So this is what this log helps you identify. Of course, we have a single-click restore back of the issue, attachment, whatever the case may be, right from this screen itself. And then from a config management perspective, let's say somebody went and changed, especially for large tenants where you have multiple administrators, someone goes and changes something in your configuration. Everything was working fine till, let's say, Friday evening. You come back on Monday morning, then there is chaos. Something is not working. You're in a couple of projects are not working as expected. So how do you go and figure out what happened? Of course, you can go and restore back your entire configuration, but before you do that, you would probably want to understand what happened, right? So we provide you with tools which will help you quickly identify what changed. Like in this example, on this screenshot, what you're seeing is I'm looking at a configuration snapshot as of what it looked like on the 9th of July, and I'm comparing it to today. And you can see, there were a number of screens which are deleted, or field configurations which are modified, so on and so forth.
I call this our CrowdStrike feature.
Sure, you can quickly find out what happened. I think that's all I had. Happy to take any questions if there are. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think, Anthony, you wanted a 45-minute time limit. So I think we've kind of achieved that. I'm actually surprised.
I'm super stoked that we made it.
No problem. Definitely appreciate that. Very good information. If anybody has any questions, please share.
Questions that I've heard from talking to people who are quite a lot of solution partners in the Atlassian world around, these mini CrowdStrike moments that people can have by messing up config, right? And I remember one last year that you told me about where we had a customer turn up and ask us to help, but they didn't have our products, so we didn't have the history in order to help them find what they had done. But they had basically killed. Tell us about what they had done to their site and the one tiny little release that caused it, because it that was not fun for them.
Right. But before that, Susan, thank you so much for being for using our apps. And yes, the new we're making more changes to the UI. Given all the functionality which is there, as you saw, we're trying to expose out all the different use cases which you can address. Our apps not only just do the basic backup and restore, but a lot more. And so yes, a lot more coming in the upcoming months. But thank you for that comment. Another comment from Brahmananda: for plugins developed in Forge, when license expires, data is losing, it will be useful. Yes. So our app is built on Connect, the Connect framework. Now, I think Stu, you touched upon the CrowdStrike, uh, you know, uh, incident last week, but a few maybe months ago, this is early May, there was an incident on Google Cloud too, where an entire tenant was wiped out. And I think there's an Australian um, retirement funds provider called UniSuper. So if you guys are interested, just go search up UniSuper incident on Google, and you'll see all that which happened. Now, what to summarize, what happened there was they Google accidentally went and deleted the entire tenant. uh, all the data, all the configuration for that customer was lost. The only saving grace was the backup data was kept outside of Google Cloud, completely in a separate place. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is, Brahmananda, to your point, if you back up your data, which is sitting right in Atlassian itself, you're essentially putting all your eggs into one basket. And from a disaster recovery perspective and risk management perspective, um, you got to you got to separate things out. There's a backup principle, or a IT principle called 3-2-1 rule for backing up things. Three copies of data, two in different places, and so on and so forth. If you guys are interested, we can point you to that. But yes, Forge versus Connect, I think backup data needs to be outside of your typical environment. You don't put everything in one place.
I definitely appreciate the information. One of the things as a solution partner, when I'm dealing with customers, a lot of customers don't understand, the complexities of, backing up and restoring data. And, we've had a couple of instances where, customers were doing, implementing new workflow, working with contractors, things of that nature, right? Or the team is just implementing, product features, and something has gone wrong. And they're like, well, how do I get my information back? Right? And they've gone through that, and they're like, I should have had a backup. So, each customer I engage with, especially the ones we're doing cloud migrations for, the first thing we say is, trial it, try it out. Just, take a look at it. If these solutions are, are great, they're an insurance contract. That's really what you got to look at, right? And then what is it, how much time does it take for you to restore your data? We've had a customer that had to go through that process prior, and it was like, a 4 to 5 day deal to get their data restored. And it caused, it pretty much stopped everybody in their tracks until that data got restored. And it was done from a prior like test backup. If now the thing about that is they actually lost a lot of their data. They weren't able to restore 100% of it. Something like, like Revyz isn't a great solution. It just, within a few minutes you can restore your data, right? You get it back up and running. It's as if it never happened. But when you can't get access to that, it can create a nightmare. And some of our customers have realized that over time. Some of them have foregone going that, but they have to circle back and added backup solutions at a later date, realizing that they should have done that day one, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is that we all hate insurance, right? Nobody wants to pay, for your car or healthcare, whatever, right? But when, let's say, car insurance, prices keep going up. I think my renewal is coming up in the next 2 weeks. I got a bill which is already up. I'm like, I never used it last year. Like, why is my bill going up, right? And we always wonder, why are we doing this? But in the scenario when there is an accident, then you're always thankful. Oh, thank God I had this insurance. So backup and restore to me is kind of falls in that category. And one of the reasons why we built out all these other bells and whistles, the config management, cleanup, analytics, is actually to provide day-to-day value to the customer, to the admin, so that when they think about, oh, why am I paying so much for backup, then they look at, I'm using the same thing for doing all these other things which help me on a day-to-day basis. So it kind of makes it up for hopefully you never have any disasters, but in the event you do, you have something in place.
Yeah. No. Now, if anybody like to contact Vish or Stu, please feel free to reach out. I definitely appreciate, everybody for joining.
Yep. The apps are available in the marketplace, just like any other app in the marketplace. You can install it, do a free trial. The trial runs anywhere from 30 days to 59 days, and we're happy to help address any questions which you may have. And Anthony, thank you again for hosting us today.
No, I definitely thank you for participating. We do have a third session coming up on August 17th. If you would like to attend that one, please feel free to register. It'd be great to have you attend. Again, thank you everybody for joining. Have a good rest of your evening, and feel free to reach out. And please join our Atlassian community page on LinkedIn, and obviously on the Atlassian community page as well. And we look forward to having you attending future events. Thank you very much.